What if you could rewire your brain to see the funnier side of life more often and even laugh more? That's what this week's episode of Laugh or Death is all about. Training your brain to be hardwired for humor.
This is Laugh or Death, hosted by keynote speaker Paul Osincup.
So welcome back. My week has been going well. I had a weird thing today. So I've been up against several competing deadlines these last couple of weeks and feel like I'm doing just kind of grinding. So today, as I'm getting ready for the podcast, I had a moment where I just wanted to freak out. Like, I've got this home studio. I do keynotes and talks and stuff from here. So I feel like I have to make it look somewhat presentable, professional. I try to get my lighting all right, just perfect, which is hard when you have glasses because you get like a glare in your glasses, okay? So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see, like, depending on where I look, you get a glare. So I've spent all this time trying to get my thing all just right. Well, one of my major light sources, my lights went out right when I was about to record this podcast. And I'm like, geez. So I started unscrewing it off the thing. And as I unscrewed it, when it came off, it's this big light here, and it came down and it hit me in the face, and my face started bleeding. So I now have this mark on my my upper lip. And honestly, I was kind of at my wit's end, and I was like just about to freak out. And Paul from like 10 years ago would have probably broken this light in half. I felt like doing that. I really wanted to, but I do feel like my mind, I was sitting there going, like, the irony wasn't lost on me that this whole thing with lighting is about trying to look good on camera, and then the light gouges my face and my face is bleeding. And so the irony there was definitely not lost on me. And so, and also knowing that, like, I'm doing this to get ready to film a podcast about not taking life so seriously. So I probably shouldn't just chuck this light across my house and get upset. And I guess as long as we're sharing, in the truth tree here, the other thing that I always keep nearby in my little home studio is a little thing of makeup for situations just like this when something like that happens. Not that that always happens, but I'll just put a little dab of makeup on my boo-boo. Uh-oh, that was a big dab of makeup. But now, for the rest of the podcast, you won't be staring at my little boo-boo. It didn't look very bad anyway, but it was bleeding pretty good earlier. Anyway, if you are listening and not watching, trust me, I look fabulous now with makeup on my face, like an idiot. Okay, here we go. Let's get this podcast rolling today. I'm just really excited to talk about ways to rewire our brains. And the thing that brought me to this, and actually that got me interested in writing a book about this, is that I have nerded out about humor, and there's been so much written about why humor is so good for us and, the things it does for our body. But it feels like no one ever tells us, like, how to do it. Like, how do I develop my sense of humor? And when am I supposed to just laugh things off in life? Like when I accidentally lock the keys of my rental car in the trunk before I'm supposed to take it back to the airport. Like, oh, life, I'm silly. No, like, those things make me freak out. But it turns out there are ways that we can rewire our brains to just not freak out as often. And a lot of people think humor is some talent that you have to have, even in having a good sense of humor. But humor is not a talent. Humor is a habit. And any comedian or humorist would tell you that it's about the habit you make about writing down, comedy or finding the funny things in life. So that's what we're going to talk about. I mean, there are plenty of mindfulness practices and stress relief practices that people do to freak out less, and enhance their well-being, like breath work and yoga and meditation. But for some people, those aren't enough or aren't the right fit or require too many essential oils. I don't know. And I think something that we don't talk about enough is, like, hey, we can develop our sense of humor to do some of this. So I'm going to share with you today 6 humor habits to help you stress less and even laugh more. All this content, just so you know, is grounded in neuroscience, positive psychology research, and the science of happiness. And so if you want all that nerdy stuff, if you want to nerd out about like, hey, where did you get this source and whatever, it's all in my book. You can check out the Humor Habit book. And so all that stuff is in here. But I just want to share the habits with you today. So the first thing before we get into the habits is just kind of to get in the right mindset. And I call it being humor positive and learning to laugh more. Because you don't have to laugh to enjoy the benefits of humor, but it definitely turbocharges all of the benefits of humor when you do laugh. And so in the first episode, I shared with you that we stop laughing or dramatically reduce our laughing at what age? Do you remember as you're sitting there thinking, oh yeah, I remember he told me this. If you remember that it was the age of 23, then congratulations to you. You are very good at remembering random facts. You should go do trivia. But yeah, at age 23, we start laughing less. And for me, you'd think that like as a comedian, I laugh a ton or that I would always laugh a lot. But I found that I didn't. I was somebody who didn't laugh very much. And as a comic, like I've noticed this, there are two types of people. There are people who are generous with their laughs and those who withhold their laughs. And I definitely in my life have been the latter. And I think part of it is that I intellectualize humor. Like when I'm watching comedy or watching a comedy movie, I do think about like the setup of jokes and things like that. And also other times, I don't know, I'm just not, I don't let myself laugh. And this was a problem for me for a long time. I realized that you ever do this where you're watching a movie and you genuinely think it's funny or a TV show and something funny happens, but instead of laughing, you kind of sit there and go, that's hilarious. But you're not laughing, but you think like, that's funny. But like my brother-in-law, Dave, he will watch comedy by himself and I'll hear him in another room just like, just cracking up. And I'm so jealous of it. But it turns out that we can change that about ourselves. We can train ourselves to just laugh a little more freely, a little more loudly, in a genuine way. I just love, there's this quote from George Bernard Shaw that says, we don't stop laughing because we get old. We get old because we stop laughing. And I have seen those people at my comedy shows who sit there with their arms folded and almost refuse to laugh. I've watched other comedians, national headlining comics. The whole room is laughing, except like there's this like one dude or one woman sitting there with their arms folded, like almost trying not to laugh. And I think, what is that about? Why won't you let yourself do that? And I am that person at times. So I think the first thing that we can do is get ourselves into a mindset where we'll laugh a little bit more. And so one way to do that is to just fake it till you make it. Like if there's something when you're watching a movie or a TV show or live comedy that makes you, smile, like just push out a little bit extra. If it makes you, smile a little bit, then just push out a little. If it makes you chuckle a little, then push out just a little extra laugh the next time. Like, and it will feel weird at first, but particularly if there are other people around, the more that you all are doing that, you'll play off each other and it will be contagious. And I genuinely can say over the last 10 years, just by kicking it up just a little bit of a notch, faking it just a little bit extra. And if there's something that genuinely does make me laugh, like, then push it, like let myself really laugh hard and not be confined by whatever that is. And so when you're choosing to watch comedy of any kind, social media or live or TV or whatever, go into it instead of thinking this better make me laugh. Change your mindset to, I can't wait to laugh. Even just going into it with a smile on your face starts to change the chemicals in your brain. You could practice that right now. Like you could just put a smile on your face right now. It doesn't have to be real. You could not mean it at all. but just the act of putting a smile on your face right now, even just the shape of a smile, you could be thinking, why am I doing this? This guy has no idea. I'm listening to a podcast. But just by putting the shape of a smile on your face, you're starting to get oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin flooding into your brain. And it will help loosen you up a little bit. So go into the next comedy you watch thinking, all right, I can't wait to laugh, and I'm going to let myself laugh a little bit. So that brings us to our humor habits. And one simple habit, we're going to start with like the easiest things, maybe some things you already do and you don't think about, and then we'll get into some more advanced things. But the first is something I call having a humor homie. And this is just somebody who you agree to send funny videos back and forth, no questions asked. You don't have to respond to each other. And you probably already have some of this on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, where you've got friends that you just send stuff back and forth. And make sure that there's no requirement to like respond to them or whatever, because all this is doing is helping you be accountable to like, I'm searching for funny things when I'm on the internet and not just doom scrolling news and that kind of stuff. And you start to build up a treasure trove of funny stuff that you can go back to later. And make sure you're saving favorites. Have like a whole like favorites pile saved. This might be stuff you already know, but I think it's good to think about having those things. Then that brings us to our next habit, which is something I call a comedy chaser. So I know there's a lot about screen time and, whether or not you should, have less screen time and when you should stop watching your screens. I'm not going to lecture you about your screen time. We've all got our habits. But a comedy chaser is a habit you can do at the end of your screen time, whenever that is, if that's at the end of the night before you go to bed. Because a lot of times the things we watch on TV are stress-inducing, which is fine. I'm not going to shame you about your true crime murder show that you want to watch, if that's what you're into, or you really do watch a lot of news. That's fine. But whatever the last screen time of your day is, or maybe it's the last screen time before you go into work or go back to work, just chase that more serious, news that you were listening to on your way to work with something funny. Because what this does is it replaces the stress-inducing chemicals with stress-reducing chemicals in your brain and gives you a fresh start. So feel free to do a little comedy chaser with some of those funny videos you're saving, before you end your night or before you go into work. So that's one very simple thing you can do. And if you don't want to do screen time at all, you can also choose to have funny books. Just remember, your book collection doesn't have to look like it was curated by TED Talks and that it's all Brene Brown and Simon Sinek and, Stephen Covey. Like, just remember, you can have comedy books too. You get a memoir for, Tina Fey's memoir, Mindy Kaling, or I just read Seth Rogen's autobiography, which was funny. A book is a good way to get some humor in too. It doesn't have to be all super serious and, make you look like a genius because of what you're reading. Okay, your next humor habit is something I call a mirthful mantra. And I really like this one. It's fun. If you're somebody that follows positive psychology, and neuroscience, that kind of stuff, you probably know that mantras are actually really helpful and good for you. Saying things like, I am not angry, I am calm. Those things really work. My problem with those is I can never take myself seriously doing that. I mean, like maybe if I'm trying to get ready for something, but in the moment, like when I'm having a freak out or like when that light hit me in the face today, when I was trying to get ready for this podcast, I just wasn't in a headspace where I could go, I am not angry, I am calm. And if I'm sitting there at my computer saying like, I am not angry, I am calm, that means I am probably about to put a 7-iron through my computer screen. I just, for some reason, I can't do that. And I'm a skeptical person in general. So I'm always skeptical of like, is that actually going to help me? And I know that doing mantras increases your overall well-being, but it also, to me, I feel like increases my chance of looking like a total freak. And so I don't do them. I've never done them. But I realized one time that I do have a mantra. Mine just happened to come from a Bud Light commercial. So that Bud Light commercial where they say Dilly Dilly? Like there was a guy who brings beer to the king and, they're trying to impress the king and they have wine and they keep bringing all these like fancy mead wines for your highness, and he doesn't like that. All he wants is Bud Light. And so they would bring all this fancy wine and the king would go, send him to the pit of misery. And everybody in the king's court would go, Dilly Dilly to the pit of misery. Well, for some reason, me and my wife Kelly would say Dilly Dilly to the pit of misery when things were not going well, whatever was happening. And so I realized that was a mantra of sorts. It was like my sprinkler system just sprung a leak the day we're supposed to go out of town for a vacation. Dilly Dilly to the pit of misery. And then I realized like your mantra doesn't have to be something serious. Whatever it is that would give you a psychological reset, give you a little space or perspective from the bad thing that's happening or that's about to make you freak out. And once I realized that these mantras don't have to be some like perfect thing that is on the wall of a yoga studio or on a inspirational Instagram story, I realized, oh yeah, we can do this in so many different ways. I mean, just by Dilly Dilly one, it can be all sorts of different things. Like my boss told me that we don't have the money to hire that assistant director position, so I'll be assuming those duties. Dilly Dilly to the pit of misery. It's something just to maybe get us by in a situation where we want to freak out just a little bit. So there are some other ways that you can. They don't all have to come from commercials. Or anything like that. One of the mantras that I use and still use to this day as a speaker and a comedian is it's all material, right? Thinking like when something bad happens, thinking to myself, it's all material. And that's kind of the mantra I went to today when this light fell and hit me in the face, made me start bleeding, and I wanted to freak out. Is thinking to myself, okay, it's all material. This is probably, and then I was like, you know what? I can start the podcast by talking about this absolute shit show that was happening and making me want to freak out. And so thinking something like that, it's all material, could be for your next presentation or at a dinner party. Like, okay, I can't wait to tell this story. And we can, in real time, reframe what's going on. There are other ways to come up with your own mantra, though, as well. And one of those is something I call a movie mantra. So you can do it like thinking of movie quotes. We don't have to be all austere and powerful with our mantras. Instead of austere and powerful, how about Austin Powers? And thinking maybe there's a great quote from a funny movie that will help reset you when shit's hitting the fan in your life. So maybe it's Dr. Evil going, throw me a freaking bone here. I'm the boss, whatever it is. Or one that I really like that particularly I've used actually when I was getting myself all worked up and too competitive in sports. And I say sports very loosely. I'm talking about I'm on a curling league with some friends, but I am so competitive and I always want to win. And so when I was having like a bad game and I was starting to get all in my own head, I thought of Ted Lasso's Be a Goldfish because they only have 10-second memories. And that helps me like, okay, just wash it away. Like it's fine. And it also puts it in perspective. Like, dude, this is curling. Like quit being such a weirdo about being in a curling league and trying to win. So movie mantra is one way. Another way is sarcastic singing, taking a song that is actually really positive and upbeat and singing it sarcastically while things going on. There's a song from the Lego movie that my wife and I sing when something's going. Like, there's nothing like cleaning up dog diarrhea off the carpet while you're singing, everything is awesome, everything is cool when you're part of a team. So whatever, the song could be Happy by Pharrell or Good Life or whatever, sarcastically singing very upbeat, happy things while something bad is going on or you're dealing with something that sucks can give you a psychological reset. I actually noticed somebody doing a mirthful mantra on TV just the other day. There's a show that everybody's watching right now called The Pit. And I was watching this episode. I'm just starting. And Dr. Melissa, was kind of having a moment in the ER and kind of freaking out. And she stepped outside and went outside and started singing the Megan Thee Stallion song, like, I'm savage, classy, bougie, ratchet, sassy, moody, nasty, to herself to like get her just reset. And I was like, she's doing a mirthful mantra right now. And then she got like back in her wheelhouse and got back at it. So, hey, whatever it takes for you to do some kind of a psychological reset. And if you do like your more serious mantras, you can still do those in a fun way. Think of a funny voice doing your mantra for you. So having Gandalf going, this too shall pass, or Elmo going, I have a choice and I choose peace, or whatever it is that might kind of just get you to go, okay, this is momentary, whatever I'm feeling, and I can reset myself and not freak out too bad. Another great humor habit that I really like, you could try this as a 1-week challenge. You could do this today. It's called a 3 funny things intervention. And this, all you do is each day for the next week, write down 3 things you found funny or amusing. Maybe they made you laugh out loud, maybe they didn't. But the 3 funny things intervention is so great because people who did this just for a week actually increased their overall happiness and decreased depressive symptoms for up to 6 months. And what's more is that this really does start to train your brain to start to look for those funny things throughout the week. Because inevitably, when you do this 1-week challenge, inevitably what will happen is something would happen during your day that normally would annoy you, aggravate you, upset you. And you'll think to yourself, I'll be writing this down later. And that's when you know your brain has started to make the connection that even if you're not laughing yet, your brain is like, hold on, don't freak out. There's probably some humor in this situation. Maybe taking that potential freak out that you're about to have from like a 9 to a 6, right? And your brain is letting you know, like, all right, just clock this, store it for later. You write it down, and maybe you'll find humor in it a little bit later. Another humor habit that's really fun to do that you can do with your colleagues or your family at home that's similar to 3 funny things is called a humor jar. You just have a jar somewhere in a prominent location like the kitchen or office meeting room or break room and have slips of paper next to it. And so often the funny things in our life, they just happen spontaneously. Someone does or says something funny and we all laugh and we forget about it. But with the humor jar, take those funny moments, write them down and put them in the jar. And what this is doing is it's taking the act of savoring. We're savoring that moment by going, this was great, this is so funny, we should capture that. So you're actually getting a huge boost naturally by savoring that in the moment, recognizing this joy that's happening in your life. You're also then getting to double dip on the science of happiness by coming back later and reminiscing about that moment of laughter and joy that you had. Plus, it helps you remember all those funny moments. I remember when my wife and I have a humor jar, and I remember when we were first starting to do it, I came home from a conference and immediately put something in our humor jar because at that conference, I was an 8 a.m. keynote speaker for this large group. And that morning, I was getting ready to go do my talk. I wanted to just get my stuff ready in my room. And so I went downstairs just to get a tray of food from the continental breakfast that was downstairs and bring it up to my room while I got ready. So I was in my room and I just hastily threw on the clothes I had on yesterday to go down and get my breakfast and then sneak back up to my room. But when I went down there, all the conference attendees are down there getting ready too. So I was trying to just kind of sneakily get my food real quick. And every step, I was in this buffet line, and every step I took, I noticed something moving down my pant leg. And I'm like, wait, what is that? What's in my pants? And I realize whatever this was gets down like past my knee now. And I take another step and I'm like, oh my God, that is the underwear that was in my pants from yesterday. And I was like, what am I going to do? I can't keep walking and have my underwear come out the bottom of my pants in front of all these people. So I'm like standing there with holding one leg up at the knee, like just some dirty flamingo, as I'm like kind of half hopping back to the elevator, like, we'll see y'all in a little bit. And I remember writing that down when I got back to the hotel room, again, kind of partly with my mantra of like, it's all material, but also partly I wrote that down to go put in my humor jar. And because we were able to revisit that later, I keep all those slips of paper. Then I haven't forgotten that. That was like 6 years ago. Another great, this is the sixth of our humor habits, and it's something I mentioned in the first episode of the podcast. It's something called humorous reappraisal. Kind of playing the what I could have said game. When something really stressful happens and we look back at it and go, man, I wish I could have handled that with some levity, not taking that moment so seriously. So even if you didn't catch yourself in the moment and you did freak out a little bit, or you were angry, you were upset, it's still actually very beneficial to our well-being to go back and see if we can mine our struggles for nuggets of humor. It's called humorous reappraisal, and it actually increases our overall positive emotions and decreases negative emotions even more so than normal positive reappraisal that psychologists use. And so a lot of psychologists are helping people through using humorous reappraisal. And I gave an example in the first episode about after my mom passed and they brought food into her room as she was lying there dead. They brought her lunch to her while me and my family were grieving. And I was talking about how later on, playing a little humorous reappraisal, like what could I have said to that person? But it doesn't have to be such serious moments. It could just be moments in our lives where we had a hard time not getting upset, or where we made a mountain out of a molehill. One example is with this executive. I was working with this group of banks, and she said they had a team meeting, and everyone got an email about where this meeting was going to be, a place to get lunch off-site. Everyone got an email about a change of location for the meeting except her. And it was totally accidental, but she didn't know that. So she went to the original place on the other side of town. The rest of the team went to the new lunch spot. And she said she was really upset because by the time she would have gotten there, she would have missed the lunch. And she was just very upset. And when she was headed back to the office, she was just steaming. And people told her, like, it was a total accident. We didn't mean to leave you off that email. We're so sorry. But she couldn't let it go for some reason. And she even gave her colleagues the silent treatment for like the rest of the day. And she kind of played the what I could have said game, or humorous reappraisal, said, I wish I could have come back to the office and just joked about it, said something light. So the humorous reappraisals that she came up with in thinking about that were, coming back to the office and going, hey, thanks. That was the first hour I've had to myself in 20 years. Or, well, that sure made splitting the check a lot easier. Those were her ways of reframing it. And it doesn't even matter if we crack ourselves up doing that. Just the act of doing this helps us kind of reclaim the moment and not stew so much on it and have all these negative thoughts about it moving forward forever. But it also helps us be more likely to find the humor in a situation later. Because what happens is, we'll think to do the humorous reappraisal, maybe a couple days later, and then a day later. And then we'll think to do it a few hours later, until eventually our brain is starting to see the humor in these moments in real time rather than retrospect. And we're starting to be more hardwired for humor. Another example that a colleague of mine, Steve Sultanoff, he uses this when he's working with clients of his. He's a psychologist, a therapist. And he said he had a guy that had real anger issues. And he was walking out of a store and he had a newborn baby. And the woman said, and it was raining outside, a woman said, "Hey, make sure you cover that baby up. It's raining outside." And he got just irrationally angry at that comment. Like, what does she think? I'm an idiot? She think I'm not going to, think to cover my baby up? She think I'm a bad dad? And so when he was processing this with his therapist, Steve, he said, well, what if you were able to handle that with a little levity? What if you could have said something funny to reduce the tension there? What would you have said? And so the guy's favorite that he came up with were, when the lady said, "Make sure you cover that baby up. It's raining outside," were him saying, "Oh, it's okay. We've never bathed him." Or, "Well, how's he going to grow if I don't water him?" And again, it doesn't even matter if those crack him up. Just the act of taking that situation a little lighter makes it more likely that he'll take the next situation even a little bit lighter. So hopefully some of these humor habits are things you can implement. And, just like learning a musical instrument or a foreign language, your sense of humor can be developed. And just like any new skill, it's not necessarily a talent that you're just born with. Some people have a proclivity to do really well with learning a new instrument or a foreign language. But for all of us, those are skills that you can get even better and better and better at, even if you're starting at a really raw place. So remember, humor is not a talent. Humor is a habit. And by building a humor habit, you can learn to see and experience humor, not just by chance, but by choice. So please follow, subscribe, and like the Laugh or Death podcast. And if you want to learn more about all the tools that we talked about in this particular episode, it's all in my book, The Humor Habit. So you can just go to thehumorhabit.com. And until next time, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Laugh or Death with Paul Osincup. If you're planning a conference or event and want something smart, meaningful, and actually funny, book Paul to speak. To learn more or to get a copy of his book, The Humor Habit, visit laughordeath.com.